here in just a few minutes, give a chance for everybody to get on. We'll kind of go through the beginning stuff like we always do on our webcast, and then we'll get into the meat of the stuff. Okay, everybody, looks like it is the top of the hour. Like I said, we'll kind of go through some of the beginning stuff. If you've never been on one of these webinars with us, kind of just talk about how the interface works and some things that you can do. One of the things that we do at the end of the webinars is allow time for the typed questions. So if you see the question portion of your interface right here, you have the ability to type questions. I will wait to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. I usually leave about 10 or 15 minutes just in case there are any questions that I can take care of any of that stuff at the time. So if you do have a question during the webcast, again, please feel free to ask them, and I will get to that at the end. Again, if you haven't been on with us before, you have the ability to listen and not really speak because you guys are in essentially muted mode, but you have the ability to listen either through telephone or also through your mic and speakers, or essentially your speakers on your laptop if you have one, or speakers on your desktop. Also, if you've never used the interface before, that little orange arrow button, it actually collapses the interface so you can see more of the screen. Sometimes that thing is hanging out in space, and it's kind of a pain to see all the stuff that's going on. So go ahead and collapse it, and then you can expand it back out, and it takes care of that also. For those of you that have not been on, I do a number of these webcasts and on a number of different subjects, but my name is Ben. I work out of the Dallas area for CDT. For those of you that are direct PTC customers or not familiar with essentially the value-added reseller, there it is, the value-added reseller. Let me make sure everybody's still here. Yep, you guys are still there. Okay. With the value-added reseller concept with PTC, essentially PTC is Ford, and we are the Ford dealership. Okay, so we service all of PTC's customers in between, or I shouldn't say in between, but from 0 to $250 million in revenue. Anything between $250 and $1 billion, PTC decides whether they want to deal with you or not, and then anything above $1 billion is what is called a direct PTC customer and only deals with PTC. We do provide all of the certified training, well, I shouldn't say all, but in our areas, the certified training for PTC products. We do have certified training centers in all of the facilities that you see below. We have just recently added Charlotte, excuse me, didn't want to sneeze, Charlotte, Cinemas, New Jersey, which essentially is Philadelphia, and then also Orlando. We've had our traditional training centers, which we've had since we've started the business in Kansas City, Dallas, or which is Arlington, and then also St. Louis. We provide sales, implementations, consulting, education services around nothing but PTC products. So you won't see us selling anything else. We've been doing this for a long time, and as of this last year, we essentially have become the largest reseller in North America. We were purchased by a company named Barry-Wehmiller. It gave us a lot of resources, a lot of financial backing, and PTC here lately has even decided to start eliminating some of their value-added resellers and kind of reduce the number. And with our resources and our history, we are one they're going to keep around for a while. So we are experiencing a lot of growth. With that comes a lot of growth pains, as everybody experiences. But we're going down a good track, and we're excited for our future. If there is any, I got to remember to mention this at the end. If there is any other, or if there is any, I should say, training questions that you might have, obviously because we do provide training, please feel free to contact me. I'm actually the training manager, as you see up above, for CDT. Also, you can go onto our website and look at our training schedules. Those should be duplicates of what is on the PTC site. Sometimes they're not always in line, but we try to keep that up as best as possible. If you do have specific training needs, feel free to let us know. A lot of times customers will look at a class, but they don't have all that you want. Just as a reminder, if that is the case, PTC does allow for custom courses, and essentially you get to take and pick and choose of any modules from any course that you want and combine it into one course. Obviously, you have to stay within the time frame that they offer for some of their courses, but you can do that, and it's kind of nice, and it's really not that much more money per se. Also, it's just a few extra dollars per day, and you can get some pretty custom training, and you can take what you want. You get a book that has all of the custom modules in it, and it's pretty nice. On another note, because we are talking about the machining stuff, with the Creo 2.0 release, PTC now has a turning class, which they never had before. So if you are also doing turning sequences, there is now a turning, or if you're looking to do turning sequences, there is also now a turning course that is available, and I think it's a 2-day course, maybe a 3-day course. I can't remember how many days it is. So if you really wanted to, you could combine the milling and the turning course and get some good stuff out of it. So just a quick reminder about that. Now, before we get started, I'm going to have our moderator, which is Rosalinda. If you heard her voice before, she is going to put up a question for you. This question is for me. She'll kind of give me the results. It helps me kind of have an idea where everybody's at as far as version of software. So, Rosalinda, would you please put that question up?
Here you go. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, it looks like a majority, over 67%, are using Creo Parametric 2.0. 0 are using 1.0. 22% are using version 5.0, and we have 11% using anywhere from 2.0 to 4.0.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. So looks like we have a good mix of versions that we're running. I would assume that for those of you that are using 2.0, a lot of times you get on these because even though you're using 2.0, you don't know exactly what some of the changes are. For those of you that are using 2.0, remember that you can go to the What's New document from PTC and use the What's New document to find out. There we go. I had to get that out. The What's New document on the PTC website, it has essentially what is the What's New, but it's only from essentially 1.0 to 2.0. So if you're looking for a 4.0 to a 2.0 document that's going to show you all that stuff, to be honest with you, you're not going to find it. If you do have some more questions around that, you will see a lot of the changes that they have made throughout the years essentially been applied, but there are way too many to even count if you're coming from essentially a 4.0 environment and going forward. But at least this will give you a good idea of where the software's at. and some of the things that they have done. So with that, we'll kind of get into what our agenda is here today. All right. So agenda, the first thing we'll talk about is interface. Not only interface as far as different buttons and where are buttons at, but also there is not really necessarily a new procedure, but when you go to create operations and you go to create toolpaths, all of that has been put into the ribbon, and yes, it kind of looks like a different process. It's still the same process, but buttons are a little bit different, and the way things highlight are a little bit different. So we'll talk about interface and also how to customize the interface. In Creo 2.0, they introduced two different, well, essentially three, but the first one is two different types, new types of toolpaths. The round and chamfer toolpath, which essentially cuts rounds on edges and chamfers on edges, which makes it nice when before you had to do some trajectory work or some type of surfacing work just to cut those. So I'll show you examples of those. The cut line toolpath, which has been separated out from surface, even though you still can do it in surface. But we'll also look at what is called the auto cut line option, which is kind of cool. You don't have to do as much definition. There's a few 3-axis trajectory improvements that we will cover also, and then at the end, if you were at the last PTC user, and this might have been before that, to be honest with you, there was a manufacturing presentation where there was a slide that showed some of the past Creo 2.0 stuff, and so I kind of took a screenshot of that presentation and kind of shoved it at the end. And there's one thing that I think, if it's going to happen, could be really cool, especially if you're doing 5-axis stuff. So we'll get to that. All right. So if you are not familiar with or have not seen essentially the interface now for Creo across all of PTC's applications, whether it's mechanical, which is now simulates, or Pro E, whether you're in drawing mode, assembly mode, or part mode, or any of that stuff, now essentially you will find a ribbon interface, okay, this ribbon interface. And so right along with all of the rest of the applications, the manufacturing applications are all now in a ribbon idea. And if you're not familiar with it, the way that it works is that all of your commands, again, whether you're in just doing design work or you're in manufacturing, essentially exist in one of these tabs that you see that I'm kind of pointing at right here, okay? And so underneath those tabs will be tools specific to that tab. And when you're talking about the manufacturing side of it, you will have the manufacturing tab, which is all of your manufacturing setup, right? So it's operation creation, tools creation outside of toolpaths, fixture setup. You'll see post-processing and gouge check and Vericut and all that other stuff within the manufacturing tab. And then in your milling tab or mill tab, you will find all of your functions based on milling ideas. If you are using the turning functions, or if you're using turning within Pro E or Creo, forgive me, I still say Pro E sometimes, you will see also a turning tab sitting right next to it. Now, honestly, I don't like the way that they offer this to you right away. I'll show you how to make changes into it and the changes that I make to it right away, just so you can see some of the things that I do. Again, not that you have to, but I just think it makes it a little bit more easier. And then also what I'll do is, because there is such a different interface that you have, I'll show you the simple creation of an operation, and then we'll kind of start a simple toolpath creation just so you can see some of the new interface and things that are flying at you that are different from the previous versions, okay? So from here, essentially, guys, I'm going to pop in and out between Pro E and my PowerPoint. So we'll jump out of my PowerPoint, and I'll throw up Pro E for you, or Creo, and here we are. And so here is the interface now that you will have to deal with at any given time. And let me just make sure you guys are seeing what I expect you to see. There we go. Just want to double check, make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay. And so here is the interface that you will deal with at any point in time. Now, even if I start at this part, you know, if we go back in time, it's going to start out and you're going to see essentially the exact same interface. So if you kind of go across from left to right, most of this stuff, for the most part, the actual buttons look the same. So here's your reference model, the model that you're assembling. your workpiece creation, here's your fixtures, here's your machines that you create, operation creation, all of your manufacturing geometry. And then after you have created an object, you will see, or created operations in toolpath, you'll see play path, you'll see your CL file creation, you'll also see your post-process file creation, and then underneath, and let me drag this back down, there we are, underneath this guy right here, if we had a toolpath, you would see, if I hit this drop down right here, you would see, and I'll show you this here in just a little bit, it's called Material Removal Simulation, which is Vericut, and then under Validate, you will see Gouge Check. Now, from the Manufacturing tab to the Milling tab, underneath the Milling tab, obviously you'll see all the stuff that has to do with milling. Now, what I do kind of find nice is that under the Milling tab, they do put all your manufacturing geometry, but then you have all of your tool paths, okay? And so here's all the tool paths. They have grouped roughing and volume into one tool path. Trajectoring, the 2-axis, 3-axis, and again, if you're doing 4 and 5, it's all right there, okay? If you hit the drop down for milling, you will see thread milling, pencil tracing, the old local milling idea. This is a new toolpath. I haven't messed with that too much. I probably need to, but again, I probably need to look at it. Probably should show it to you, but I don't know if I can today. And then also the 2 new ones that you'll see right here. Now, for default, and I forgot to take this out of here to show this how it's usually set up. This toolpath right here is actually usually in the drop down, this cut line. And again, if you know what cut line milling is, it's usually a part of surface. They have broken out, and now it's its own, but actually usually it exists here. I just throw it up there to make it easy. Now, for purposes of making this a little bit more efficient, I don't like the fact that the manufacturing tab and the milling tab are so far apart because, again, you will dive back and forth. So what you have the ability to do is customize your interface. And now, the way that you do this, if you've seen this in any other of the presentations, it's still the same, is that when it doesn't make a difference what tab you're in, but if you right-click in your ribbon, you have the ability to say Customize. Okay, now if I hit the Customize, this little screen pops up, but really what it kind of gets in the way a little bit. What I can do is actually drag mill and put it right next to manufacturing or in front of manufacturing, okay? And then also, at that point in time, I also have the ability to drag any of these objects around, okay? And so if I come in and say in my mill tab, right, here are all of my tools. You also, or here's your tabs, right, or essentially your subsets. And then also at this point in time, I have the ability to drag, take out, move, whatever I want. I also can take any one of these commands and drag them to where I'd like to. And so it's a customization of your interface. If you don't like or never ever use corner finishing, you can get rid of it. If you don't like 90% of the hole making tools, you can get rid of it, or you can add to it, or you can change its location. And so it's the ability to customize the interface. This is true throughout all of now PTC's software. Again, whether you're in design mode, essentially it behaves exactly the same. But again, one of the main things that I do, I don't mind having these extra ones out here, especially because I do demo work. I just move the mill over closer to manufacturing, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to deal with it. Okay. All right. So when I'm done, I hit OK, and there we are. Now, at the same time, what I just talked about was there is quite a bit different when we go to create operations of those things. So if I kind of drag this up above here, we have one operation, right? There's my operation, and I guess I can insert one down afterwards. But all I'm going to do is hit the operation button, and this is quite a bit different than what it used to be, okay? And so what you will have here is if you have a list of machines, underneath here you will have your list of machines. If you do not, one of the things that you don't realize when you first get into Creo 2 is how do I create a machine or how do I find a machine? Well, for whatever reason, they put it right here. Okay, so right here, manufacturing setup. If you hit the drop down, you have the ability to create a mill machine, a lathe machine, your mill turn machine, or underneath this guy, you will see your user-defined work center or any of the machines that you have created. So under the manufacturing setup, there it is, my user-defined work center. So if I saved a work center and it went to the specific directory where my config says it go, I can go find that object now, put back in my machine, and find it that way. Okay. Here is obviously your machine coordinate. So it goes machine coordinate system. You can see it's highlighted right there. And then under clearance, you will find what type of retract plane that you have. So here's all your retract stuff, right? Still have the cylinder, right? No retract, plane retract. Underneath your options, this is where you will find all your materials, right? So here's materials underneath options. any fixture setup that you were going through, and then all these other ones are just simple parameters and little process stuff that you have seen at any point in time. But quite a bit different interface from the regular old drop downs on the right, but for the most part pretty straightforward. As long as you remember over here you will find your machines. Okay? Now, one thing I will do here is I'm going to create a new one, and I think this is important to bring up, especially if you use Wildfire 4. I can't remember in 5 if it was done this way, but I'm going to create a new milling machine. Notice how I hit milling machine. This all looks the same. Yeah, let's do it this way. So here it is. We'll just leave all this stuff alone. There we are. Clearance off of the plane. We'll pick a value. We'll go ahead and use the same one. We'll say OK. Now, once I create that, one thing that you will notice is that if I go back to my milling guide, is that if I create a toolpath, I'm essentially creating a toolpath for this operation. If you want to create a toolpath for that operation, all you have to do is right-click and say Activate. And now the toolpath will go under this operation. If I go back to this guy, right-click and say Activate, I'm now putting toolpaths under that operation, which is really nice because before, if you were using Wildfire 4, and again I can't remember in 5, is that once you created the toolpath or once you started the toolpath, it asks you what operation you were building it in, and in this way, again, it's just right-clicking and saying Activate, right-click and say Activate, and you got it. So it makes it a little bit easier to deal with, and I kind of like that comparatively to what it was in the past. So we'll go ahead and delete that, and there we go. All right. So fairly simple interface stuff that you have to deal with, manipulation of the interface, kind of going over what the new buttons look like per se, and then also a little bit about the operation stuff. Okay. Oh, toolpath creation. Let's do one for toolpath. So a little bit new of the interface for toolpath creation. So again, if I were just doing something fairly simple, just a trajectory, pretty straightforward. Again, I have my trajectory right here. Right. What you'll see is, again, is quite a bit different look. It's again based off the ribbon look for your toolpaths. A majority of these look this way, and I'll show you what I mean by majority here. But what I have right away is that I have no tool. If I hit the drop down, if I have a list of tools that I've already used, I will have that list. If I want a tool that does not exist, or if I want to create one, if I want to grab one, again, once I hit the edit tools, it goes back into the old interface that you have been accustomed to. At this point in time, you can create a new tool if you want to. I can hit the open button and find the tools that I want to, right? All that stuff looks the same. All right, there it is, and there it is, okay? Now, from here into my parameters, actually, this is kind of, don't let this fool you. It's not like all of a sudden these fill out now automatically. I have something called a site file that does this work, but actually what would, if you weren't doing that, what would highlight would be parameters, and at that point in time, you will see parameters here. If you need more of your parameters and all of your parameters, you have the ability to hit the button, and then you get back into your old interface where, again, you go through basic or all, and then you go through and pick and click which ones you do or do not want to change, okay? So you go from tool to parameters. If you want to change your clearance, here's clearance. You'll see check surfaces. There's your check surfaces if you want to pick and check or add in check surfaces. Under your tool motions, at this point in time for trajectory, you would, again, pick curve cut. There would be a references button if we were doing surface milling, or if we were doing some type of value milling where you actually go in and pick a window, or you pick some surfaces, it would say references and you pick them. But in this case, I'll say tool motions, put in my curve cut. There it is. And again, I will go pick the specific curve that I want. We want to, let's say, offset cut, and we want to go to the inside. We'll say OK. There we are. Here's our curve cut. And then in the end, when I want to play my toolpath, here's my button for playing my toolpath. This interface looks the same right here. Let's go ahead and slow it down. There it is. Okay. So again, pretty straightforward. When I first started messing with Creo 2, took just a tiny bit getting used to, but for the most part, once you just kind of understand the flow of it, it really isn't that big deal to get through that part of it. All right. So this is all new interface stuff. Again, whether it's just the interface on the top, whether it's interface for operation creation or interface for toolpath creation, it's all different, but I promise you it's not that hard. Also, real quick, and for the most part in milling, I don't know how much you actually need this or turning, is that if you've seen this before, this is actually kind of cool, is that let's say that we're in the tools command. Let's say we want to find surface milling, right? And if I'm in the tools command or the tools tab, and for whatever reason I have no idea where the surface, my surface toolpath creation button is at, if I go over to command search and start typing in surface, notice how whatever I type is what I start to get. And if I go over and hold over surface milling, it actually will go over, and if I had my finger on the screen, you can see where it says mill in yellow, and then if you see where it says surface milling, it will highlight, and then also I can left click it and start from there. Now, because and I was going to get into this, and I'm glad I did this, watch this. And this is something that obviously if you've been around PTC milling for a while, sometimes, I shouldn't say sometimes, there's been a number of times when their interfaces haven't been as consistent, and here's one of them. And so for volume, ta-da, you get the drop downs. For trajectory, you get the ribbon. For surface milling, you get the drop downs. I don't know what to say to explain that. Obviously, that is a PTC thing and something that was either not accomplished or not finished or strategically not finished. But to be honest with you, it would be nice if it was all based at least out of the ribbon. So for those of you that have used it before, you know what the drop downs were about and how they work. It would be nice if everything was ribbon, but unfortunately, that is what it is. Okay. All right. So there's all the interface stuff. All right. Creating toolpaths for essentially rounds. Now, if you have some type of edge round, there is a toolpath specifically for that. It is based off of the surface that you select and also the tool that you have built. And again, it could be a solid tool. It could be just your regular edited tools. But for the most part, and I'll do this here in just a second, you pick your surface, you pick your tool that you want, and then for the most part, the software does the rest, so which is pretty nice. Before, if you were doing this, you had to do it with some type of weird offset trajectory and had to be very careful how you're doing it, or you were doing it with specifically with some type of some type of surfacing toolpath, whether it was cut line or not, with the ball end mill, and then you were trying to run down essentially across the round itself. For the most part, and I'll show you this here, the chamfer tool works exactly the same. Again, it's based off the chamfer surface selected and the tool that we pick. But essentially, I'll do both of them at the same time because for the most part, they're the same. Just one's round and one's chamfer. So here they are. Again, this part that I have is a really basic part for this. Just so you know, I kind of highlighted some surfaces just so we can differentiate between the surfaces that we're going to use. But I have a rounded surface here on the inside, and I have a chamfer surface on the outside, and then we'll use a little red surface a little bit later on for some cut line stuff, which is kind of cool. Okay, so here is my round toolpath. I pick it, and again, go through the same type of interface we just talked about. I created the tool. If I pick it, and just so you can see what this tool is, essentially here's the shape. All I did was just gave it a name, just configured some sizes, some pretty generic stuff. Obviously, you can play with most of these values for whatever reasons you need to. Just gave it a name that it's identifiable. There it is. We'll say OK. There it is. And so what are my references? Essentially, what are my references is what surface that I want. So I'll say I want that surface, and I'll just hold the control button and pick that surface. Notice how I can flip from one way to the other. Essentially, this is conventional versus climb cutting. And then I have some parameters since I do have a new tool. That little corner round tool is new. I don't have all this stuff set up specifically for that one. We'll put in a value just that we can see work. There we are. There's my toolpath that has been created. And if we replay this guy, there it is. Nobody likes to watch toolpaths during the demos, right? But there it is. And again, you can put in lead in and lead outs, but I now have done that, okay? I haven't got a chance to play with a whole bunch of this one. If you look at your parameters, there aren't a ton of parameters that you have in. Obviously, you have lead in and lead out. Honestly, and maybe it's just because my site file is keeping some of these options away, I really wouldn't mind seeing, and again, I don't know if they do exist. I guess I need to alter my site file to make sure that they don't, or that, excuse me, that they do. is that if there's some type of step in or step down, or essentially more profile cuts or step down cuts, because essentially if I was taking out an entire corner, depending on how rough that, how much material I had right here, you might not have taken that in one. So again, I'd have to look at that. I probably should have had that ready for the demo. I just didn't think about it at the time. But anyway, it's something to look into, okay? So this is the round one. Here it is. Here is the chamfer. Again, no tool. If I come down here, again, if I go to Edit It Tools, I actually have a little chamfer bit right there. Again, sizes, notice how it is a chamfering bit. The other one was the rounding bit. It gives me sizes. I have the ability to control different values right here. Let me cancel out of this. I thought I saved that. There it is. Let me make sure my, thought I had a little different value. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I have a little bit of value. Just put a flat at the bottom of it. If you don't put in a value right here, essentially you get a dead point, which is kind of goofy looking, but you can see that. But I put in a little flat at the bottom of it. So here's my tool that I'm going to use. From here, again, references. It says, what is your surfaces? Again, we'll just go ahead and pick the surfaces. Hold in the control button. Get into parameters. Again, just something simple so we can get it going. There we are. When I'm done, okay, when I hit the play button, if I run this back a little bit, there is my chamfer bit. Now, one thing that I did learn here recently, and again, I think it's more because of my site file, because I'm filtering off some parameters, is that the percentage, essentially, it considers the initial point to be essentially the contact point, and then there is a percentage or a value that you can tell, or essentially how much or how far you want the bit cutting, essentially up and down the angle of the bit. There's a percentage value between 0 to 100%, essentially where at on that point you're actually going to be machining at. So I don't see that in my parameters. Again, it's probably because of my site file, but it's something that you can adjust. So when we saw the toolpath, you can see where it's cutting at. Probably isn't the optimum spot, but you do have the ability to alter where that is machining at. We probably want it, maybe that much flute on this side, and probably because of that, maybe right around there for that much flute on that side. So anyway, there is the chamfer milling. Pretty straightforward toolpaths, pretty easy to use, and those are two new ones for Creo 2.0. All right. Okay, so here is some new things in cut line, and quite a bit different because they have broke out the cut line toolpath into its own separate toolpath. That does not mean you can't do it within surfacing. So you still have the options within surfacing to do it, but if you do it from the cut line specifically toolpath, there's quite a few less picks and clicks. Anybody that's done cut line in Pro E, you got a lot of done return and some weird interfaces and a few OKs that you don't know if are necessary or not, and you got to pick a few different buttons something that goes away. Because I teach class, teach the milling class, and one of the more difficult interfaces that you have to teach is the cut line interface, because there are a lot of buttons a lot of picks and clicks and buttons that you don't even know if you need to pick are there. Also, in the previous versions of the software, when you wanted to create a helical, or excuse me, when you created a cut line with a helical scan type, right, the helical cut type, you had to go in, because it was in surface and helical was not a part of surface, you had to create the cut line first, and then you had to go back to your parameters, and then you had to pick helical. Well, now because cut line is its own entity, you can start out with helical and then go ahead and define your cut line and then go from there. Okay? And so you don't have to kind of flip back and forth between the parameters to the cut line and back and to handle all that. Also now, instead of always having to go in and define the top and the bottom of your cut line, essentially, you pick the top and pick the bottom, whether it's an open loop or a closed loop, doesn't make a difference. You still have to define it yourself. There is now something called an auto cut line option, but there's something really specific that you have to be aware of, and I'll kind of save it so you can have an idea of it. But I will show you that, because if not, it kind of gives you this little goofy warning, and actually I'll make the warning happen just so you can see it work. Okay, so here is our cut line toolpath. Again, you can do this within the regular surface one, but now there is a toolpath that they have separated out. So here is cut line. Again, this would be under milling if you don't have this put out there, but it actually would be underneath here in cut line. And I'll say cut line, and again, you get the same type of interface. So here's interface. We'll just use a simple 1/4-inch ball end mill. There we are. I'll say references. Now, the way that this is going to work, I'm going to do a regular cut line where I actually pick the bottoms and tops, and so you can see that, but it actually won't work for the auto the way that I'm going to do it. So I'm going to kind of go down a path and then have to kind of back up to show you how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yep, I want to machine the surface. I'll pick that guy, and I'll also pick that one. Okay, there's our surface that we're going to machine. Again, if I had parameters, they're automatically being filled out. Okay, notice how I do have helical. This is actually, helical will show up because, again, what am I in? I am in a cut line type sequence, so I can say helical from this point. There it is. And then from here, I'll say cut lines. Now, notice the difference in interface, right? The interface before was over here. All I have to do is say cut line 1. There it is. And it asks me to pick. Now, all I do is pick, hold the shift button to pick the other entities. There it is. And there we are. Okay? I can drag the start point around, which is kind of nice. Check that out, right? I can drag the start point out. So I'll say I want to start right here. And then I'll go to cut line 2, and then at this point in time, all I have to do is pick, hold the shift button, pick again, there we are, and there's my cut line. Now, from here, there's my toolpath defined. I pick the button to show my toolpath. We can see it work over here. Let me slow it down just so we can actually see it work. And then there is my helical toolpath, right? So no witness line as it drops down the surface. It actually helicals the entire time that it goes in, and if we kind of look at the bottom of it here, we'll see it get to the bottom. There we are. All right. So this is the helical option, right? Helical option, a lot less picks and clicks that you're used to within the regular machining, or essentially the regular, I shouldn't say machining, the regular surface cut line that has been in the previous versions of the software. Now, let's back up here. And so underneath the let's see, tool motions, yeah. Underneath tool motions, cut lines. Oh, here we go. Underneath cut lines, if I go to this guy, right, underneath my cut lines, and I hit the auto cut line, I get this warning. Now, when I first started, I couldn't figure this out at first. Like holes, well, what holes do I have? I don't see any holes in it, okay? That's not really what it's talking about. I found that out the hard way. Is really what it's talking about is the surfaces that we picked. If I go to the details, the surfaces that we picked were this surface and this surface. The hole is that it is open-ended right there. And so what happens is that you actually have to have a surface that has a bottom, or the surfaces that you're picking must have a bottom to them for that auto cut line to work. And so if I come over here and hold the control button and add in that surface, okay, now I have essentially a closed-in loop with a bottom on it. And now when I go to my cut lines, what I can do is let's remove this cut line, remove that cut line. We don't have any cut lines. I'm off this to this auto cut line. There it is. It does the auto cut line. And now when I hit the play path, I say go, and there we are. Okay. So instead of me having the software force the picking of the cut lines and picking of the cut lines, if I pick the surfaces, what they filled in at the bottom, it'll go ahead and do it. And then also, notice how it also cut the bottom of it. There it is. And it cuts the bottom of that surface. Might not be perfect, obviously, because our square corner, but at least we get a little bit of machining on that surface also. Okay. So auto cut line must be essentially a surface with the bottom. You don't have to pick them, and there you go. Okay. So this is the auto cut line option now, and it is only, this one is only in the cut line toolpath. Okay. Okay, so the last one that I'll show is for some 3-axis trajectory stuff. Again, if you haven't used, or if you haven't seen an update since Wildfire 4, trajectory has changed quite a bit. I'll cover a little bit of that change because I noticed, when we asked our questions, there were some 4 to 5, or at least some guys that were on 4, In 5, I think they made this change in 5, so this is it mimics it. But also now, when you do a trajectory, and if I pick a edge at the bottom here, before, if you put in the number of steps and the step depth, essentially it would run around and then drop, and run around and drop, and run around and drop. And yes, obviously you can still do that. And yes, you can put lead in and lead outs and do that. But now there is an option that if you're doing it this way, and if you're having essentially number of steps and depth, also I'll show you a different way to do that with start height, is that you can put in a helical option to start at a certain point and then helical around it. So again, kind of like the cut line, this helical concept has been built into the trajectory. So if you're doing this type of step down, and again, instead of having a little witness line, and depending on chatter and tool deflection, all that other good stuff, is that you can continually stay engaged with the material and maybe get a little bit better finish. Okay. Also, when you're going and picking these start points, you can just drag your start point around to change where you are engaging the material and where you're starting out with it, and essentially will duplicate what we see here on the screen. Okay. All right. So in this one, again, it is just a trajectory. Okay. Here's trajectory. Again, same type of interface. We'll go ahead and change and say we want an end mill. There's our end mill. Right? I have some parameters that are already filled out. Notice how, though, there is not a scan type, but there is, and this is important, a helical pitch and what is called helical bounds. Okay? Pay attention to that because we're going to come back to that here in just a second. And so from here, I'll say tool motions, and I'm going to go ahead and put in a curve, or essentially I'm going to put in an edge. I'll pick that guy. I'll hold the shift button. There we are. And pick that one. Okay. Now, we'll go ahead and offset it, and we'll offset it to the outside. And then also what I'm going to do here, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to go down to that height, but I'm going to start at that height. Okay. And then I get this result. So I'm going down to a specific height. Kind of a bad term for it. It should say ending point or ending slice or something like that. And then it says start height. But then what you have, which is interesting, because and we'll come back and we'll pick this, but here, this is what you would have before this. If I come through and we see our start point, if I say OK, we see our drop, and again, what you'll see is just drop, 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 okay? But if I come over to my tool motions and do an edit definition, I can say I want a helical cut. Now, notice how it's some really big helicals, okay? There's really big helicals. So yes, it's doing a helical, but it's at a very big chunk of material at a time. So what I can do, if I come back to my parameters, that helical pitch controls the pitch of the helix. And so if I come over here and put it at 0.1 and say OK, now when I come in and hit the play button, you will see obviously quite a bit different result. And so here's the play button. There it is. And again, no drop, just a constant helical all the way from the top to the bottom of the object. Okay, so a helical cut in trajectory. There it is. Also, if I come back and tool motions, edit definition, notice how I can drag this guy around. Let's say for whatever reason I wanted to start there. Notice how I drop right at this point, and again I play path, and that would be the path for me. Okay. All right. So little differences in some of how these behave, some differences in how they look. Again, cut line, trajectory is a little bit different. Surfacing is, the cut line's been separated from the surfacing, and then the round and chamfer. We talked a little bit about interface. And then the last thing that I'll do here, because this is kind of part of the interface, is that if I go into manufacturing, right, I have the validate, which is gouge check. I also have material removal simulation, which is Vericut. And then also here is output, a CL file, and then here is also post-process. So if I come in and say, hey, I want to output, I want to save a CL file, but notice how it gets back into the old interface. I'll say, here's operation. For that operation file, I still can create my G code on the fly with this guy. I say done. All same interface that you would expect it to be. Now we're going to go through. There it is. Okay. There we are. And I've now created my toolpath file that you see right there. Okay. If I go up into material removal simulation, again, this is Vericut. What do you get? Here's Vericut, CO file. Here's my CO file. And none of this would be any different. And I don't have a workpiece, so this really ain't going to work too well, right? But it works no differently. And then as soon as Vericut fires up, there we are. There it is. And then I would have all my stuff right here so I can see it actually in material removal simulation. Okay. So for the most part, pretty straightforward. The differences that they have. Again, none of the manufacturing geometry has changed very much, except for the fact that it's new interface, right? It is new interface. How you create surfaces and mill volumes, you will see the new interface when it comes to dealing with that stuff. Okay. So for the most part, pretty straightforward. To be honest with you, I don't think the interface changes are that drastic. They're fairly easy to get used to and how they behave, but there we are. Okay. So just some simple things, some new things about Creo 2 that I wanted to show you. The other thing that I wanted to show you, and then we'll kind of leave it out to questions here at the end of the webcast, is that stuff for the future. Now, I've only been shown this. I haven't really been, or I shouldn't say shown this. I've only been shown this slide. I shouldn't say shown this. that wouldn't be fair. It'd be really cool because I would be able to show it. But when I saw this essentially is some future stuff that they're looking into. One of the cool ones that you see on here that I like is this tool axis definition. And for any of you out there, any of you guys out there doing well, I should say not 3, but 4 and 5 axis surfacing and trajectory stuff, when you want to go in and control an axis, usually what you have to have is an axis pointing in your Z direction, or essentially a long Z to control that, right? And so wherever you want to, you could put 15 different axes that control it at different points and all kinds of other little stuff that you have. But if you haven't seen Creo 2.0 as a design software, they essentially have incorporated in this what is called a 3D dragger in the design software. And it looks like now they're going to try to use that same 3D dragger to manipulate tool axis orientation during the path of a toolpath, which would be a massive improvement compared to how you did it before, and honestly would be kind of cool. So if I'm going down this line right here, I would be able to drag my dragger from this side where I want my toolpath in, and then when it gets about right here, I want it on this side, and I want it to be kind of at this angle, and here. And so that would be kind of cool if you could do that. Not that it's for sure that it's going to happen, but we will see. So here are some of the, again, future considerations that PTC is looking at. They might have put in some more. This is just a PowerPoint that I had, or actually a PDF I have from a number of months back that I wanted to shove in here so you guys can see this. Okay. So machining stuff in the future. Hopefully they get some of this in, especially the tool axis. That'd be really cool. Okay. All right, where are we at time-wise? All right, good. Right about perfect. Okay. So the last part of this, I will put in for any questions that might be out there. If you have a question, please feel free at this time to ask a question. If you do not have a question, and if you're not interested in listening to any of the questions or the answers, essentially that pretty much concludes what I'm showing today. So you can feel free to jump off if you'd like. If you'd like to stay on, again, please feel free to ask questions, or if you'd like to listen, there you go. Okay. All right, let's see what we got. Let me expand this out so I can see this here a little bit better. Is there a list, Kevin, is there a list of customers available showing who is on Creo 2? Now, do you mean Creo 2 as in machining, or Creo 2 as in just in general? There are a number of different customers that are moving to Creo 2, even some of PTC's larger customers. Creo 1 was more of a stepping stone in the Creo releases of software. But if you're talking about design software, PTC is putting a very big push on the Creo 2 as a design software. So there are a lot of larger customers. We are teaching a lot of Creo 2 training classes. A number of our customers, again, they're a little bit smaller comparatively, right, to John Deere. But a number of our customers are also in Creo 2 as far as design software. So yes, there are a number, but as far as a list, I honestly, I don't have a list, but I wish we did. It'd be nice, but no, I don't think there's a list out there. Sorry. They don't give us that information either. Material removal between sequences. Okay, so Mr. Klein, if you're talking about the material removal features in between sequences, if you're talking about the actual feature that you can put in, the answer is yes in some cases, but for the most part, no. And the reason is I find it to be unreliable or even non-functional in some cases. If you're creating some type of complicated voluming sequence that you're using a ball end mill on, fundamentally the software for what that feature is trying to do cannot produce all of the essentially leftover material, right? It just can't do that. So if you're doing simple facing material removal features, then yeah, it works well. But if you're doing something a little bit more complicated, all of your leftover material, that's not going to be generated by that feature. It would be very hard on the software to try to put in all the scallops that were left over. So it's an interesting concept. It can be useful when you're using it on simple things or square end or square end mills. But to be honest with you, I don't promote it very much because that's not the only thing you're going to do with it. So yes, but no. Hopefully that answered your question. Again, if you have a question, again, feel free to ask at this time. If not, go ahead and hop off. And I forgot. Oh, sorry. Let me make sure I do this. That's me. If you do have another, any other questions, then feel free to take that information down that you right have there. Send me an email. Give me a call. Mr. Spell. Mr. Spell, my operation, the machine that I had was only a milling operation, or essentially a milling machine, so the turning tab does not show up. If your machine is a mill turn or a turning specific machine, then you will get the turning tab. So that's the only reason it's not up there, is just because it's not a machine that has turning capabilities. That's it. Mike Klein. The way that the tool knows that if you're doing like a re-rough or the local mill or that rest, the way that the tool path bases its cuts is it bases it off of a previous tool path. So it essentially analyzes the amount of material left over, including the stock, the tool size, and your step depths to base its what needs to be cut. So it does not base itself off of the geometry that's left over. It just doesn't calculate that, and it's never have. So it's based off of the previous tool passes, size of tool, step depth, step over, and then stock material. That's how it goes about its business for any of those cleanup type functions. Am I planning a webinar for expert machinists? To be honest with you, no. Joe, we know each other, so if you really would like to see that, you can shoot me an email. I can show it to you. I don't have anybody that's using the expert machinist. Essentially, the expert machinist is actually something that comes along free now. If you buy a CETA Pro E, you get expert machinist for free. So PTC hasn't changed that in I don't know how many years. They haven't updated it, done any improvements in it. it's just something to kind of wet your whistle. So if you really wanted to, you could create some very simple toolpaths in it. There are some users out there using it for machining purposes, but to be honest with you, I don't even know how much PTC is even keeping up with that anymore. So to be honest with you, probably not. We probably won't do a webinar for it, but if you'd like to see something on it, just shoot me an email and I can see what I can come up with. I will stay on and continue to take questions if you have any, all the way to the top of the hour. Again, if you're done, go ahead and feel free to hop off at this point in time.
Ben, it looks like everyone's leaving already, if you want to wrap up.
Okay. I will give it, looks like we have just a few guys on. I'll give them just a few minutes just in case they're trying to put a question through at the last.
Okay, no problem.
I don't want to cut you guys off just in case you are. If you're not asking any questions, go ahead and feel free to hop off. If you are, I'll give you a few seconds to get that up there. All right, so it looks like we'll probably safely done now. So Rosalinda, looks like we'll finish up. Thanks a bunch.
Okay, thanks.
All right, bye.